I'm trying to get better with redstone, so I've set myself a rather musical challenge. Can I make a music box? And yeah, I may have made one which works so well that you can even put real life music in it. This is genuinely really cool. So let's sit back in Minecraft. So this is my 2-year survival world. I spent a lot of time on this, as you can probably tell. And on my Discord, I got a suggestion to basically make a theatre, and I've already got one, but there is nothing going on in the inside. It's completely empty. So the long-term goal is to turn this into an actual functioning theatre. And I think first things first is let's try and make the music for our film. And it feels very good being back here on the creative testing world. We spent a lot of time here recently. I highly recommend you check out my Vibrant Visuals puzzle series. They are a lot of fun to watch. Of course, I'm talking about making a soundtrack for a film, which I've not even made yet. So we need something which is going to be highly customizable. And just anything, you can just plug in music and it plays it. And so then I was thinking about note blocks and how well these work. And I was also thinking about the fact that you get music boxes in real life, which you basically just put in a slip of paper with holes cut out. And then whenever there's a hole, it then plays a note. And so I was thinking something like this. This is just kind of like a test concept. But we're to have a block of gold there. And then we've got our stone kind of like this. And then a repeater. And you can see that's going to activate. And whenever there's a block there, it's going to go. But if there's glass, then it's not. And so you could essentially have something like this. Whenever there's glass, a note won't play, but whenever there's a full block, it does play. Does that make sense? Now, I'm really not very good with redstone. I wonder if I could make a piston feed tape. And so it's basically that kind of conveyor belt that just goes in a big circle. And so then this piston will then push the glass there, which then pushes it up, which shouldn't have done that, which then pushes it along, which it can't. Okay. You can kind of see my problem with redstone. I think it's just slightly too long, but you can kind of see what I'm getting at. This now works. So whenever we press the button, it now just kind of pushes everything along. And then I'm thinking right here is where we can have our sort of repeater, which would then feed into our note block. And then whenever there's a solid block, so us to put that there, we then shift the entire thing along. And then this one here, it will then play a sound. Now, if you imagine that we've got loads of these, we can then just have random blocks placed throughout, and then it'll play music. I mean, it's that simple. And so I've found this really, really useful thing from the wiki, which basically just puts all the music notes on a piano key. And so that means I can just place in 40 note blocks, and then that'll be every single musical key. I'm not doing the black keys purely because I've not got the space. But now that's an entire sort of row. And then, yeah, this will allow for so many musical possibilities. And I will just very quickly thank you all for getting the channel to 14,000 subscribers. I mean, that is crazy. I mean, it really is. Thank you all just so much. I've also turned on channel memberships. A lot of you guys were wondering how you can support me directly, and now you can. Every single membership tier gives you exactly the same thing. It's just purely if you want to, you can support me. But looking at this here, it's now time to start getting in this other line of redstone, which again is just the repeaters, and this could be slightly tricky because of the limit with the redstone dust. If we're to try and connect this all up, if we put a torch in the end, it's not gonna, oh, perfect. Okay, that's great. And so now I'm just gonna start getting in all of the glass blocks in like this, and then same with everything on the top. And so it's looking something like this, which is quite good. And then we should now start trying to figure out how to connect all the pistons together. And so we are on Bedrock Edition, so I can just do like that and it will just connect to the pistons, which is such a great feature. And I believe that should trigger them all, and it does. That is great. And we can do the same with this one here. And the likes of this one here, this could be slightly trickier because if we place blocks up here, you'll notice that it no longer plays a sound. And I'm thinking for that, we could just use stone slabs, and it should still be able to play music whilst simultaneously allowing the redstone to connect up the top. And it's looking like I was wrong. That is surprising. This one could be slightly more tricky. Does just running redstone along the top, does that work? That is not along the top, that's along the glass. And then if I was to power it from this end, does that? Oh, brilliant. Okay, perfect. And now out here, we can then just connect redstone repeaters just like this, just so it's a full signal strength right there at the beginning. And then we need to try and figure out which way this goes in. So it needs to trigger this one first. So it goes into a repeater kind of like this, and then up a redstone torch tower, which then powers that, which can then feed all the way along over to this one. I believe that should work. So we do that. Yeah, okay, great. And then it needs to come back down to connect to this one. And then just doing it like that should work perfectly. So again, if we were to press this, it should then just trigger everything along. Great. And then back to the start, it moves it along all again. Does that work? No, it's not. Why is that not working? Is it too fast? Is it too much of a delay? Or too little of a delay, rather? Okay, that seems better. Yeah, that's 100% working now. Okay, great. So that's kind of like the piston feed tape, I believe it is. And then we can just connect this simply onto a loop. Let's slow that down maybe to that speed. And then I believe it's just as simple as connecting it like this. We should... Well, I'm going to drop that down so I could do this. Oh, that looks way too fast. Is that better? No. This is just staying on. Why? Because of the delay? Okay, that seems to be working. So I've got it to a speed where it seems to be working. How quick the note blocks play is entirely determined by this piston feed tape. But it's weird. Sometimes it just doesn't work. Like what it's got, and then it does what? This is weird. Maybe it's to do with the redstone torches. I'm not exactly sure. I'm going to try and play around with this. So I've changed it to this setup here, which gives out a very, very quick pulse. I believe it's 1 tick or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. But when I press this button, you can see it changes this, which then updates the comparator, which then gets watched by this observer, which then triggers the pistons basically. And I've gotten a lot better results with this than, you know, this version over here. Because I think the main problem was the fact that it was trying to push pistons into the arms of pistons, into this part here, and it just wasn't for doing that. You can see it's just slowly bringing things around. I'm just trying to basically clear out all of the misshapen blocks from the previous version. And then it's going to get to a point where it's going to stop pushing. I think we have reached that point now. So I can basically just replace everything here with everything over here. And it should work quite well, I hope. And then if I was to trigger that, it should move all the way around. And it does. Okay, so let's connect it to the loop. And it's kind of working. Not really. Why? That's so annoying. Maybe rather than having it on a loop down here, we instead just bring this around and then just connect it up to what's already existing. And then if I was to just press a button like that, it should then... Yeah, that's working quite well. And then using that wiki page, I can then just add in all the notes. And so then to make it easier, I'm going to put some signs down, which will then basically just tell me what note is in the corresponding note block. So we'll have this to be a G, and then an A, B, and then a C. And then this will basically just allow us to then input any kind of note from any kind of sheet music. I don't even know how to read sheet music, but I should be able to because I've got the notes here. And then I'll be able to just kind of put in just random notes just wherever. And so now I'm just going to place in some blocks randomly and just see what happens, okay? So this could be really not very good. And then we press this button to activate it, and then it will start to cycle through the feed tape. It's a little bit wonky. Okay, it's not great. And what's more is the piston feed tape just seems to bug, and sometimes it just doesn't move, which is really, really annoying. Maybe it's... Wait, I think it could be that, but what we'll do is we'll break it just now, okay? Let's try and go for something a little bit more recognizable. I've also set up this command block, which will just clear and just replace it all back to glass. And then I wonder if this is going to work or not. Imagine I got copyrighted for this as well. So that's now done. Let me know if you recognize it. Hopefully I've done it right. That was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Okay, this actually works quite well. Now, I've got no idea if anyone has ever done this before. I'm sure someone has, and I'm sure they've done it much better than I have. But this was just really fun, just messing around. Let's do one more song before we call it there. I have, however, just quickly tweaked a couple things. I've made the repeater slightly faster, so now it goes at this rate, which is so much better. And I've added in an extra beat. So I've just added an extra note block here, which has sand, and then whenever there's a block, it then plays the note, of course, but whenever there's not a block, it then triggers this, which is like a bass, and it's like a bass and a snare, I believe. And so that means we can get a lot more creative. Because if we were to just quickly put in Mary Had a Little Lamb, we can then make it sound a little bit something like this. Which, I mean, I think that is pretty cool. Thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it.